topic once again tonight is the 2013 budget. I believe under the circumstances, it would be good for the interim finance director and the city administrator to walk us through where we are as far as revenues and expenditures, and we'll go from there.
I'm not sure if our time is going to be well spent by going line item by line item through all of the different changes that occurred between planning and Plan B, or whether we'd like to tonight focus on the highlights of the three departments that are the most impacted by the mayor's proposals in Plan B, which would be fire, police, and public works. So I think it's kind of the council's pleasure, but as you can see from page, second page of the mayor's updated message, or something like that. There's a list of the major changes that are proposed in Plan B. And I'll walk through those really quickly, but then I think we'd be better off in the Plan B budget.
You should about the II.
It's II.
Okay. Thank you.
Is the list of the highlights. And so, we walked through these last Tuesday, but we'll walk through them quickly, and then probably, if the council is okay with this, I would like to call the individual department directors up to talk about the impacts to their budget as a result of the proposed Plan B, and then be open for any questions from the council on that. So, again, Plan B proposes to reduce irrigation and maintenance to parks, greenways, and facilities further than it already has been. It eliminates the triggering contract for greenway maintenance of Wilmington Drive and greenways throughout the city. It eliminates the triggering maintenance contract for Powder Works Park. Eliminates the maintenance of the soccer and baseball fields in Powder Works Park, effectively closing those. It proposes closing the DuPont Museum while preserving the collection. We still have money in the budget for utilities and for insurance, so we don't lose the assets contained within it. It proposes increasing the water utility tax rate by 1% to a total new rate of 12%. It increases the stormwater utility rate by 2% for a total new rate of 10%. It establishes a new business and occupation tax for existing businesses to supplement and not duplicate the current tax code. This proposal institutes a square footage tax based on 5 cents per square foot of building space. It eliminates one public works maintenance worker. It eliminates the service contract with West Pierce Fire and Rescue, the portion that contains the half-time assistant fire chief, as well as the IT and record support and training divisions. It eliminates 4 firefighter positions, including the 3 currently funded by the SAFER grant, and it eliminates 1 police officer position. So I'm not sure which department you'd like to start with, but we'll go ahead and call up, let's say, our police chief.
First of all, is that okay with the council members that are here, or is there a different procedure that you would like to follow? Larry?
Yeah, okay. Can we talk about any one particular item on here?
Why don't we do it methodically by departments? To me, it looks like it's mostly public works, police, and fire that are affected here.
Public Works first.
Okay.
Are you talking about Public Works?
Well, we can go in whatever order I'd like.
I don't care, yeah. I mean, it's different to me. If you go Public Works?
Sure.
Because I have something in mind here real quickly.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, Public Works.
Peter, could you please take a seat at the table?
Come on up, Peter.
Yeah, come on down, Peter.
We're all friends here.
Yeah, okay. That's what I'd like to talk to you about right now, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, for the past few weeks, I've been talking to a number of historical society people, and they feel pretty much the same way I do. That if you get rid of your culture and your history, it's like losing your right arm, like it's a state or nation or a city. They've come to the conclusion that they can go without a manager. That they also have $25,000, of which part of that they'll spend once again to keep it open on 2 days a week. The thing is, don't quote me on this, but there's an estimate out there that it'll cost about $200 a week, $800 a month, $9,600 a year. And they're willing to go that $9,600 to keep that museum open. So my thing here is that the city would not lose a penny, or lose very much on this at all, if they kept the museum open, if they let the Historical Society pay the way for the year. They have enough volunteers to work there and keep the thing going, and they're willing to make any any particular amends they possibly can to keep that thing open. And I definitely support that 100%.
Okay.
Well, one other thing too, they're talking about the idea that the tourism board even said they would get $7,000 to take care of the upkeep of the building. And all we're asking once again is for the city to keep the water running and the heat on. Because once you turn that heat off, not only the building, but also the products.
Right, no.
Yeah, it goes, yeah, exactly.
I believe the city fully intended on keeping the electricity and the heat.
Yeah, but they want to go beyond that and keep that thing open for at least 2 days a week.
Okay, everybody, I direct you to page 38 of the budget. That's where we discuss the museum. Roger, you have a question, comment?
Yes, I'd like to concur with what Councilmember Wilcox is saying, that as we look at page 38, we can see that the city is not being held responsible financially for the staffing or the management of the museum. And I certainly do concur that the Historical Society could very well staff and manage at their discretion the operations of that facility. In addition, I'd like to draw your attention to page 45, which is the hotel motel tax fund. And if we look down on item 41 under professional services, and the footnotes down below, it says the tourism coordinator of 25 hours a week. I would suggest that that coordinator be located there at the museum, and with the intent that that facility could very well be looked upon as being a tourism center, with the location of the tourism coordinator being there. In addition, if you look at the first footnote, you will see that the hotel motel tax is also being used to pay for 50% of the recreation and event coordinators' wages. And here again is another staff member that could very well be located within that facility a part of the time, at least to the point where it would be looked upon as being part of the tourism program. So the concern is that we have funds available for operation and management, but it may not be a line item such as what you find on page 38, where the city would be obligated for operation and management. In addition to that, I don't see it here, or it could be explained on page 45, and that was that the committee on the hotel motel tax did identify $7,000 that would be used for enhancement of that facility so that it would move towards being identified as a tourism center. So I think Council members Wilcox's point of view here, as he expressed it in his conversation with the Historical Society, is certainly something that is very doable with all these other features put into that particular approach.
Please.
Well, okay, but we have to be careful. I believe the person who is paid 50%, is it 50%? The recreation events coordinator. We have to be careful because it had her focus is promoting and doing events to bring tourism into town. It's not like she is over there as a staff person running the museum. And all of this has to be worked out with the Historical Society, and I wish that they were here this evening because I know in the past, when there has been a tourism coordinator, they have relied heavily on the Historical Society and the museum staff to provide them with information. So I don't, and Don, you need to clarify this, but I don't know if the tourism coordinator can be considered the museum, can be running the museum. I'm not sure about that.
You can use lodging tax dollars to staff the museum as long as, I believe that they've got data now that shows that the majority of their visitors that come to these events or to the museum are from out of town.
Okay.
So you see, there certainly is a nexus, and you can use those funds for that.
Okay, but we need to get both sides together because with the tourism board might be thinking how they want that person to operate might be different than what the Historical Society sees it.
I believe the lodging tax committee, when they spoke about this subject, had talked again about having the museum also do double duty as the visitor center.
Yes.
So therefore, the tourism coordinator would be housed out of there. I believe what Larry is referring to is the Historical Society is willing to pick up a part-time employee
Right.
who that is their primary function. It's not drawing in tourism, it's not doing any of the promotional, it's just to be there to staff the museum, someone who's knowledgeable of.
Right.
Yeah. So it's two different people that are talking about.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, a couple of things. I promise I'll have some historical members here next meeting, and I just talked to them real heavily last night. I had a big meeting last night. I talked to them previously, but last night was a big meeting, and they said, throw this out, see what you can do, and then if it comes like it looks like kind of a positive thing, then they'll come in and talk.
Okay.
And also the Doris, or Doreen, Doris, yeah. She, I think her time is terminated till in March. Is that correct?
That's just,
Yeah, they said they would pay her salary up to that time, yeah.
that would be a Historical Society conversation.
Yeah, okay.
We're involved with. And Roger, just to follow up, there is the $7,000 of their operating supplies that the lodging tax committee had recommended putting there for some enhancements and repair things to the museum.
Where is that?
It is under line item 33, operating supplies, on page 45. 7,000 of that is earmarked or designated for cosmetic enhancements. I think is what the lodging tax committee called it.
Line 33?
Right, operating supplies, 33. 7,000 of the 19, correct?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we kind of jumped ahead of our director here. Did anyone have any other comments to make about the museum?
No, I just wanted to hear
Okay,
you go through the
right.
budget worksheet.
Okay, Peter. Go ahead with your presentation from the department, please.
Would you like me to speak to the relation
The
to...
budget B impacts. that was listed in the mayor's message in the proposed budget.
The budget impacts includes,
Do you have your budget read? Yeah. Yeah, that's the first time I've seen any dollars attached to it. Do you have dollars attached to these figures?
This was from the presentation from last week, from the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, we weren't getting copies of that.
Probably not. We can provide copies to you. I don't actually even have a hard copy of them.
Go ahead, Peter.
So just speak to the budget proposal general fund impacts that were on the presentation last time. Reducing irrigation and maintenance of parks, greenways. The number of 11,500 breaks down to reduction in irrigation and greenways of about 6,000, reduction in irrigation in parks of 5,000, and reduction in irrigation in facilities of 500. Totals to that number. The elimination of 2 green contracts for the Wilmington Drive and Cottage Park. The Wilmington Drive portion of that contract is 7,000. Fireworks Park is 20,000 approximately, so that's how you arrive at the 27,000 there. The effective closure of the soccer and baseball fields and the restrooms. Currently, the budget, in past years, I should say, the budget included monies for field repairs, and you recall, mainly the fields being shut down and repairs made. So soil seeding, fertilizer, head repair, those types of things have been eliminated in the proposal. Closure of the restroom facility would include decrease of paper products that are currently used, the water, sewer, power associated with that building. So that is the 7850. Museum manager, we just talked about a little bit with the museum manager, funding for the museum manager position, and then the reduction from operational costs that were included in that budget previously to utilities currently. And then the last item that's on there is the elimination of public works maintenance worker. That's the general fund portion of the currently vacant position that is proposed not to be filled. Any questions beyond that?
Okay, we need to just kind of slow down here again. How much, what's the dollar figure on the museum manager? The 25,105?
It's 20,000. A little over 20,000.
Yeah, 25,000. That's closing the museum, that's managing a piece of that.
Okay, well, we're leaving the museum open because we're running utilities, and the volunteers are planning on of operating the museum. So what's the figure that we're reducing because we aren't going to have a museum manager? What's the figure?
Well, the total savings that we calculated was $25,100. That was, the largest portion of that was the museum manager's salary, but that was also, as Peter said, some of the operating costs, the paper supplies, the cell phone, and things that were also a part of that. The money that was left in the budget was what would cover the utilities, the basic utilities, lights, as well as the insurance on the building and pest control.
Okay, so are you turning off the phone at the museum?
Yes.
You gotta be kidding me.
If the museum was closed, that was part of the proposal. What we're hearing from the historical societies, that they're willing to talk with the city about what those costs are to keep it open for the part-time basis. So, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know I went over them with Larry earlier today.
$50 a year for phone.
$550 a year for the phone? Okay, well, we need to know that. The council needs to make some educated decisions based on that. Okay. Go ahead, Linda.
question about the soccer fields and baseball fields. If there's no maintenance and there be no sports,
We have talked with our recreation events coordinator about the potential to shift city programs over to potentially available alternate facilities. She's engaged in that conversation, but that would be a proposal to shift the active play, the high impact play to facility.
in other communities or in other communities?
The desire would be in DuPont, some of those programs could be in another community as currently functioning in the health games.
What would be the cost to the city to have a seasonal worker that is mowing the 2 ball fields?
We can certainly get back with that number. Based on what I think I'm hearing is essentially once per week mowing of those 2 fields.
You know, as I've said over and over, I don't want to see someone making $25 an hour mowing grass. Hire a seasonal worker for $12 an hour. Mike?
Madam Deputy Mayor, look, maybe I'm missing something tonight, but I think last week we understood clearly that we're dealing with Budget B. And my expectation is that I'm not going to write this budget in longhand. I would like to see the difference between Budget A and Budget B. What services are going to be reduced, what money are we going to be saving, and what is the impact on the city? And I think that's what we're looking at. And, you know, we've got some hard decisions to make. And it's been made pretty clear that preserving to the largest extent possible public safety is in the public interest. And I think in previous comments, Councilmember Ehrenreich has eloquently pointed out that the role of a municipality is first and foremost public safety. Everything else is subordinate to that requirement. I don't see anything that shows me the proposed reduction. What is a bottom line figure by department what we're saving? And if that's not what we're prepared to do tonight, then I'm not sure what we are doing.
Yes, I wish we would have had a sheet that has all the figures on.
Okay, so Peter, bottom line, Budget B. We implement Budget B. How much are you reducing the public works budget by? Total.
The reduction would be the summation of the 11,500, the 27, the 7850, 35,105.
Okay, I got a calculator. I'll do it. 92,000.
About $92,000.
How much does it cost to maintain the bathroom over there? Keep it open? Yeah. The difference between Budget A and Budget B for Public Works is $92,755.
Well, this adds up to $90,757.
Well, I'm going by Budget B and Budget A.
Okay, so we save $90-some thousand with Budget B over Budget A. What does that look like? Okay. Public Works Director, what does the public see for that reduction?
For that reduction, the primary thing is you'll see a reduction in irrigation, first of all, so you'll see brown, you'll see the grass beginning to get
Okay, so
longer.
Center Drive is going to burn up.
Center Drive is going to begin to burn up much worse than it already has. You'll also see the grass becoming longer. It will not be as manicured and maintained.
And is this all the pocket parks all around the city, all the ones that have equipment in them?
The proposal would be to try to keep some level of irrigation maintenance on our primary thoroughfares, if you will. Proposal has some irrigation for Center Drive, some irrigation for McNeil, getting out to our primary economic and residential corridors, outlying parks, and many of the other areas would actually be decreased completely in irrigation.
So they'd be allowed to go foul.
It would be allowed to go foul. You would see not only the grass browning out, obviously, but you can also likely see potential impacts on the landscape.
Okay. And when we talk about shutting down the maintenance of Powder Works Park, and I assume Clock Tower Park is included in that?
Clock Tower Park in this proposal would be provided with some level of maintenance. That's primary location for events and activities. It also has potential to generate some revenue with the stage and other things that are potential revenue generating. So it does provide for some maintenance for that, for some irrigation use levels as current. So you see kind of a partial brownout right now, but things are still somewhat active. So it does provide for that.
If we completely shut off maintenance of Powder Works and Clock Tower Park, how much additional money do we save? Don't cut any grass, don't turn on any water, let it go.
You said Powder Works and Clock Tower?
Right.
The Powder Works Park, the zero maintenance.
Zero.
So you're talking irrigation, zero maintenance. So
When your house is on fire,
approximately,
you want a firefighter, not a ballpark. Well, I'm sure you're proud of it, but don't consider that my supporting your position. I just want to know some information.
so I would have to go back and get some specific numbers, but I would estimate that would be in the neighborhood of about $12,000.
So what's on your list here already? Yeah, do we have these pieces of paper yet?
No.
Irrigation reductions would provide for some continued reduced irrigation service at Center Drive, Greenway to McNeil Street, portions of Civic Center, portions very limited of Yukon Powder Works Park, minus the fields, so there would be very limited irrigation allowed to that at all. Clock Tower Park, Ross Plaza Park, which is the heart of downtown. We have several new parks that are going to be coming on. Irrigation will be very local to the city. So the proposal would be to try to keep some level of maintenance on those, so you can see rapid die-off and a planting extent.
I do agree with that, Peter, because the park down the backside of Hoffman Hill is still trying to take hold.
Well, I'm not, don't mistake my asking the question as suggesting we do it. But I like the idea of having some absolute numbers we can deal with.
No,
Now,
I agree, we should have them.
and as we go into this reduced service, we all remember the great ice snowstorm of last winter. So if it happens this winter again, what will the difference be in your capacity to service the city?
If it were to happen again, we, right out of the gate, the proposed elimination of maintenance worker does decrease our capacity to respond. So that's one of the primary initial responses that I would have is one less worker does impact our response. It impacts the level of service for them.
So are we going to have less streets plowed? Is it going to take longer to plow? I'm looking, when people ask, part of the challenge we have is if people never see a difference, then obviously their money hasn't been well spent. If they see a difference, then they get it. And they understand that, okay, we voted for X. What does X look like? should have a clear understanding of what they've asked for. What they've directed.
Larry?
Yeah, I have to concur with Mike. I think we're kind of going around here. A couple things real quickly. I'm a little bit confused. The, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, please, but the True Green contract is for $150,000 right now, is that correct?
The total contract price?
Yeah, total contract. So what you're doing, once again, is subtracting $92,000 from the $150,000.
I believe that's correct.
I mean, roughly. So you have about $60,000 left once again to do something with, okay? Another thing too is that no?
Wait a minute, let's clarify that before we,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to clarify right now.
are you told?
Okay, the total contract right now is $150,000 for the True Green, is that correct?
I believe it's closer to 120, I don't remember from across all.
Okay, you say 120? Okay, if it's 120, then you're subtracting $92,000 from that 120.
No. His reduction comes from several locations.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify, exactly, okay. Another thing too, once again, when you talk about the parks, let them just go. Number one, once again, we're still held for liability, right? If anything goes wrong, once again, kid gets hurt over there, once again, we can be sued.
That's correct.
And the second thing, once again, is there are 2 churches out there right now at the present time that have about 15, 20 people who would like to volunteer. Now, how difficult would it be to get these people to work in the park and to take care of the park? As far as, once again, interviewing these people and liability and so forth.
Okay, but we need to clarify or, put it in a box as to what.
Well, I can't make it more simpler than that.
Well, no, I mean.
There's
that's
30
fine.
people out there who would like to volunteer to help. Okay, if you do all this cutting, leave the parks go, once again, what is the ramifications, once again, of these people being able to go out and take care of that park? Well, as far as liability, as far as, is it feasible?
I believe you're talking about mowing and that type of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly, yeah, taking care of the park, yeah.
So we would need to create an agreement with each of those groups that kind of sets out the parameters for what's expected of them, all of that, waivers of liability and all of that. So a lot of people call it a park program. We have current programs that allow for litter cleanup and those types of things. What you're describing is kind of a next level of involvement, and there are obviously some additional liabilities potentially from that.
Okay.
So you're talking running power equipment by volunteers on.
That's a touch and go thing right there.
That's a huge liability.
You darn bet it is, yeah.
That's correct, I mean, but we're in the process of trying to finalize and adopt the park policy, and part of that is working with our insurer to find out what is allowed and what isn't, and I know that there's some way you can get some level of mowing and whatnot done by volunteers, as long as there's the acceptable liability waivers in place. So we can move towards that, and
But that
because
isn't.
the word of the challenge would be is if the water's cut off.
Right. Well, in the springtime, there is grass to mow as long as it's raining, but,
Let's
once.
get back to what Mike was talking about earlier.
Well, okay, let's let, Peter, are you done with your presentation?
Just one piece of feedback from you said no maintenance. So if the park was left open, playgrounds especially, you'd have to have some level of maintenance to make sure that the park is generally safe. It wouldn't look good necessarily, but safety would be our
We're going to
primary.
mitigate our liability. When I'm talking maintenance, I'm talking irrigation, landscaping, cutting the grass, anything associated with that. What I want to get my arms around is how much can we reduce the budget? And, the council's got to make a decision where we spend the funds we have.
Okay. Linda?
I think we also need to keep in mind long-term, if we let it go, there's going to be a big cost to restore it when we do have funding. So we've already spent money, and now they're assets. They're going to become liabilities. We're going to have to spend money again down the pipe. So it's just something to consider.
I'd like to agree with you, but I can't. Since 2003, the citizens of this community have voted this much to increase revenues for anything, under any purpose. okay? We have 9 years of don't raise my taxes. They don't want ambulance service, they don't want parks. It's our obligation to deal with the budget we got. And there's no history in this town of a willingness. You know, the last time people were willing to raise taxes was when we had a 300% property tax increase in 2003. Since then, there's been zero.
I can understand, but what we choose to do now shouldn't be because of punishment for not
No, not punishment. But we have borrowed money. We have borrowed money for the last 2 years to pay our debts. Before that, we had money rolling into the city from other sources. It's not punitive at all. This is simply a matter of this city has a revenue stream of X. We got to live within X. And we have heard pretty loud and clear that the priority for that funding should be public safety. And so everything else that we spend a penny on that detracts from public safety better be really, really important and non-negotiable.
Well, that's why we're all here, to determine what is important.
This is a discussion for the council.
That's right.
And whether it's, you know, we're the ones that are gonna land a level of service.
Whether a fee or a receipt.
Roger, did you have something to say?
No.
John?
Apologize, I'm late. I seem to have my traditional holiday cold, so I won't want to shake anybody's hands tonight. I'm sure that will disappoint a lot of people. Not to confuse or change the direction here. I would like to actually approach this question of public works and some of the other budgets from a slightly different perspective. Can you identify for me for these sub-programs that we've got in public works, such as recreation, parks, and so forth, the source of funds going into them? Because in some cases we have significant amounts of general fund, but we also have significant amounts of other revenues. And I'm trying to get at where is our general fund dollars going? Those are the ones we need to cutting back because they allow us to pay for other things such as police and fire. So for instance, starting with the recreation or whichever someone we want, we have salaries and wages and professional services and things like that. But how much of that is paid for? I know, for instance, in our earlier discussions, we talked about in terms of revenue sources, we talked that there was a sales tax that was dedicated to parks. So that's, so that's $60,000 right off the top we got. Where are the other sources of funds, the other that are going into these?
That was correct. There's $58,000 that is from the local sales and use tax that is dedicated for parks and recreation type programs. And you also have your charges for services, and that would be somewhere in the, there's a few things you need to check out here, but about $138,000 worth, maybe a little bit more, and that's for your classes, that's programs, the events. You also have money, if you're looking at the comprehensive program of all of your parks and recreation together, you would also then factor in your revenue from your facility rentals and your park shelter rentals and private grants or contributions, fundraising type efforts, and all of that as well. And what is in the 2013 Plan B budget, the cost of the Parks and Recreation Program, the amount that's attributed to the recreational community events, which includes the cost of the community center, it is fully funded by revenue. So there is no general fund subsidy proposed in the 2013 Plan B budget for recreation and community events.
Okay, so there's no general fund money to be mined out of recreation and community events. That's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so let's flip the page over to parks.
page you looking
Okay.
at?
The parks.
I'm sorry, page 37.
Parks budget on 37, that 58,000 actually would be applied from the local sales and use tax. John, would be applied towards the parks program, not the recreation and community events. The recreation and community events is the other sources, the class Bs, the field rentals, the facility rentals. All of that combined covers your recreation and community events. The $58,000 would be applied towards your parks budget, which is a little over 120,000 total budget. And that is the only dedicated funding source for that.
Okay, so
So about $60,000 of your parks program, the parks themselves is being subsidized through a general fund.
okay, so that's 60 from general fund. Now, that 60 from general fund, does everybody follow where I'm going with this? Okay, I'm trying to find the general fund money. Because if there's a dedicated source of revenue to pay for something, then we don't need to talk about cutting it. And if the recreation program and the parks program are essentially, or very nearly essentially paying for themselves, there's not a lot to do. And I would just, for instance, if there's $60,000 from the two budgets together, and I'm not sure I heard that, so I need you to bring the parks and the recreation budgets together.
No, if you look at just page 36, the recreation and community events, that budget, there is no general fund subsidy being proposed in 2013.
Okay, no general fund subsidy in 2013. Okay, so I don't want to get too hung up on the word subsidy. That's value.
Right, it's funding itself.
Yeah.
Fully funded.
I'm sorry, John, I need to clarify
Sure.
that, because on page 36, the bottom line is 150,456.
Right.
And you said that they have 138,000 coming in from programs, facility rentals, and fundraisers.
No, that doesn't include the rentals. There's 138,000 in program and event fees. Then there's an additional amount for rentals. There's an additional amount for donations or special events as well on fundraisers on top of that would cover the $150,000.
So we're saying that $0 of general fund money are going into the recreation and community events.
Based on the Plan B budget, that is correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
So, flipping over the page, asking essentially the same question that the reports just asked on the parks on page 37. Can we give me the same number for what is coming from the general fund to parks?
That would be the local sales and use tax. That's the $58,000.
Okay. And, okay, so there's $120,000 line item there for the total cost. So you counted 58, what's the other 60?
That would be just general fund resources.
Okay, so 60 grand is coming from general fund. All right. And lastly, greenways. Museum, I understand that. Facilities, I understand that. That has facilities has, maybe there's some money there, but the fact of the matter is, facilities also pays for some of the things we've already identified as being priorities, such as whatever public works is left, plus the city fire, the fire police, and so forth. I'm just trying to get after where the general fund money is. So it goes to greenways on page 40. Now, I know that a lot of that, because we have, and Peter, the meter man has come down here, because we have infiltrations, trenches along Center Drive, and those are part of our stormwater impoundment process or collection process, we have to maintain those in some fashion. Isn't that correct? Okay, and for that reason, some of the money to maintain them comes from the stormwater fund. Okay, how much of that 142,000 is general fund?
All of that is general fund. The portion that is maintained out of the stormwater fund is located within the stormwater fund. It's charged there directly.
Okay, so the green, in terms of greenways, on page 40, none of the infiltration trenches, none of that stuff is maintained out of this street sweeping that needs to be done in order to keep things out of the stormwater system. That's all charged under stormwater.
Yes.
Okay.
Where's,
So this is the greenways is 100% general fund money.
correct.
All right.
So, Peter, could you explain what is this 142,000?
The Greenways budget was created several years ago, I believe with the intention of taking care of the boulevard streets, or parkways in the city, Center Drive, those types of things that connect not only the community but itself, but also separate land uses. So kind of that parkway look. So that's what this provides for. So that boulevard landscaping areas.
But there's no, it's, again, I'm trying to avoid using loaded words here, but it's primarily an aesthetic issue. Is that correct, or is there something that goes beyond that?
There is a link to an aesthetic issue here, yes. Maybe the greenways are within the right of way, and so from a minimum maintenance standpoint, we keep encroachments back, we would take care of blockages, those types of things. So this is primarily an aesthetic standpoint.
I'm not sure I entirely understand it. It's a what standpoint?
Primarily aesthetic is what we're questioning.
Aesthetic, okay. All right.
So just following on to John's comments, of this $142,798 for greenway expenditures, which is all out of the general fund, how much of that can we legally reduce?
If the council's desire is not to maintain those areas to this level of service that they currently are, they would be maintained at the absolute minimum, probably under the street fund. That would be a choice of the council. Will implement the budget as set out.
What is the line 41?
Professional services. That covers the tree green portion of the contract for the areas that are currently contracted, as well as some miscellaneous services such as tree removal. Those are some of the trees that we're not able to get to. That's where those could potentially be paid out of and have been in the past. Those types of services, stump removal, things that we're not able to get to. That's part of what is covered in that professional services.
So running on all 8 cylinders is not here, but it wasn't 8 cylinders to begin with, but what would we lose? I guess I'm trying to understand what would be the impact to the citizens, to folks, about just running this down to, a very bare number, like 10 grand or something like that.
If this were run down, I would recommend that at least some level of professional service be budgeted in there to take care of things that, such as tree removal, should we need to do that. But you would see, obviously, would be no irrigation in those areas. You would see, response to obstructions and things only. That would be rough mow, just to get things back off the roadway, the sidewalks, clear blockages, those types of things, but there would be no level of maintenance beyond that. So it would be focused on safety and access.
So what would that level of expenditure look like?
In this budget, I would recommend at least $10,000 for those unseen. The other functions and insurance, it is land, so there needs to be an insurance piece in there.
So if we cut this,
That would be down to
and so if we cut this for $142,798 to 15,000, we have insurance and emergency services for get the tree out of my front yard that blew up.
I'd say that's correct. The other thing that you would see is, you made a primary statement is the emergency services, so the emergency standpoint. So the work order comes in, it looks back, please take care of it. We'll try to get to it as a blocking those types of things.
Well, I understand. I'm not talking about anything that's joyful or, great here. I'm talking about, I can't get down the street because there's a tree in the middle of the street.
Right, you would need to leave, like you said, the bare minimums, you would need to leave the amount to cover the insurance, and I believe that there would still be a remaining minor utility charge because of the water meter itself. Even if you turn off the water, there's still a charge for the water meter.
Yeah, and I fully appreciate that this isn't what any of us want to see DuPont look like.
What is the portion out of that 85,000 that goes to True Green?
Off the top of my head, I believe it's 7,000.
And once again, why couldn't we hire a seasonal worker to start at one end of Center Drive, and it takes him a month to get to the other end of Center Drive, and he turns around, that's a level of service, but I guess these are all questions that the council, needs to discuss. Options, ideas, we all need to throw out there. And, we're not making decisions tonight, folks. We got 2 months, remember that, or 6 weeks, or whatever it is until December 31st. So,
I can remember when a bunch of us from Bay Colony were working on the greenways to save money, and because the planting was going out into roadways. So that's something to consider. There has to be some kind of maintenance. Unless you want to cut it down to one lane in each direction, because you have plants right over the road.
And that kind of follows along my thinking is that some of these, I hate that it's more optional type things that we're doing. We may have to squeeze out all the money and then offer the opportunity for folks to come back and for volunteer donations, whatever, live and back on us. And Councilmember Wilcox has brought up the fact that there's a couple of churches that are interested in stepping forward and doing some maintenance. We're going to have to get over our resistance to having volunteers, wherever that happens to be. Other cities do it. They figured it out. We're going to have to do it. Period. I mean, for me, I think that's going to be a policy issue that we're going to have to put out here. Volunteers are going to have to be used if we're going to do optional things like certain kinds of park maintenance, certain kinds of greenway maintenance. The volunteers lower the cost of individuals, whatever it is. But I don't see putting money from the general fund, a lot of money into those things. I don't mind putting a small amount of money where it makes things possible, so that if you $9,000 to keep the doors open on the museum. I'm not looking for 9,000, I'm looking for hundreds of thousands. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I mean, I'm not arguing with the museum thing. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in getting down in the weeds in this thing. We've been through this before, Councilmember Westman and Wilcox and I, several years back, when we were all working together, said, we needed to get $150,000 out of the budget. And we asked the mayor at the time, do you want to do it or do you want us to do it? And the mayor said, he wanted to do it. And staff, Don, went and found 150. I don't want to be overly prescriptive here. In other words, if greenways and they say 15,000, that's what you got to work with, you figured it out. Parks, 60,000, that's what you got to work with, you figured it out. If people want to buy back more, they're welcome to do that. There's some sort of volunteer donations, whatever. But we're going to have to find some larger dollars and not chase we just don't have time. Or the amount of our opportunity for us to argue with each other over the 1,000 all the line items is just we're going to get ourselves all this up too quickly. I would prefer to set limits and then ask staff to figure it out. I know that's not fun, it's not fair maybe perhaps to staff, but quite frankly I think they know better than we do what we can and can't do. So that's the reason I'm going through this exercise right now, trying to identify the general fund money that could be cut. And if somebody says, well, it's, I need 60,000 parts isn't enough, I need 70,000, well, okay, 70,000. We'll do that. But the idea is we're going to have to squeeze out all the general fund. That's where I'm coming from. They may not be the best approach. That's what I'm throwing out there. So, I guess following along those lines, in the parks, we do have $60,000 coming from the general fund. Now, I get it that the separation in some ways between the recreation side and the park side can be somewhat artificial, because some of the programs that are bringing in money, which fully pays for the recreation side, are also occurring on city facilities, which are being maintained partly out of the general fund. Is that a fair statement? And so we need to figure out what the impacts to that recreation program would be by cutting back parks if we were to do that. And then if, say, well, what's the effect of that? But is there, if we said you've got $60,000 to run the parks, what's that going to get us?
Right, and that's why I suggested the seasonal worker, to do the work on the 2 ball fields. To me, the 2 ball fields are important.
Yeah. Now, what other cities have done when it comes to volunteers is they just said they were going to pay workman's comp, which is cost something on a $1 per hour basis, they look for some sort of degree of training. It's not that we haven't allowed volunteers to run power equipment in the city. I've done it when we were doing the center drive, and I was running a piece of power. Did it badly, but did it. Managed not to cut my leg off. We all know what Roy did during the storm. The fact of the matter is, it does happen. We can do it. We just got to decide whether we're going to do it. And if people want to maintain things at a higher level, they're going to have to step up, either through donations or their time or money. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Especially on these, it's not as an easy an issue with the police and the fire, although there are volunteer programs that are available for those sorts of things. But this, I can see where we can say, you can live without it until we figure out the funding situation. If you don't want to live without it, then you need to step up with either time or money to fill the problem, fill the point. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Well, okay, since someone else
Go for it, John.
I'll keep going here. Certainly what I would propose, I would put on the table tonight, that the Greenway is, I will tell you how much I love the Greenway here. When I come home at night, I'm stressed out. Really, really stressed out. Driving on I-5 doesn't help. But when I get off on that beautiful Greenway and drive down that Greenway, I can just feel the stress leaving. And it is huge to me to have that Greenway. But I have to admit that it's nice, but not necessary. So I guess what I would propose is that the Greenway more or less goes away. Greenway maintenance, other than the very minimal to maintain the setbacks. I understand insurance is an allocation, so it has to be covered either there or someplace else. So I don't know, 15,000, start off with something like that. Yeah, we're going to lose some trees. I don't think we'll lose all of them, but we'll lose some. Weeds will get started. We'll have to go back someday and clearing those out. We'll probably, the grass will probably start stooling. And, but, you know, that's where we're at. From the park side of things, I need to know what that $60,000 from the general fund gets us, and can we do it with a lot less than that $60,000?
So just depend upon the 58,000 that comes from the sales and use tax?
I would like to start from 58 and then say, what more do you need?
Yeah,
What does that get you?
I mean, everything that is not public safety related that comes out of the general fund, we ought to have to show cause for.
Or at least be able to, you know, if it's funding itself, ACES, if it's a small amount of money to get it there and we can provide it.
I agree. But,
Exactly.
But we're trying to buy back people that provide emergency services to us.
So, I'm going to guess that when you talk about facilities, again, I'm not going to argue about the museum at $9,000, but talking about facilities at 147, that's all general funding, right? Is there anything there that's not general funding?
When we talked about the recreation and events program covering its costs, part of that was the cost of the community center, which is embedded in the facilities program. So that would be something that would have to be backed out as far as analysis just recently of what that actual cost was. But that is being covered by revenue that's coming in through rentals and.
So,
That Peter would have to speak to what else is included in there. I know that there's the utilities for these facilities here in the Civic Center, as well as the utilities and whatnot for the public works shop and
those all have to be covered.
those buildings. So the shop, the Shaw Street rental, which is recovered again by the rental fees are coming.
Yeah, it's pretty explicit on 39 down below there, what that entails.
Well, I guess my question was that it's some of the money, so the recreation program is not only funding itself, but it's throwing back and helping cover some of the costs of the facility side. So what is what you're saying?
For the Shaw Street and for the community center. When you add all of those related revenues together, yes.
Okay.
But that does not cover the entire cost of that $147,000.
Okay, so there's a chunk of general fund money in there.
Yes.
What if you had to guess?
I have to go back and we have to look at the numbers.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't be behind. I would say at least half of that, if not more.
147? Don't you think it's more than that?
If not more. Even though those numbers I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, the facilities page is basically, to me, tell me if I'm wrong, but it more or less looks like this is keeping the lights on and the buildings operational.
And further that, operational, fixing what is broken in some cases, unless it's something like an HVAC at the community center. But not necessarily, I mean, we have fairly new facilities here, this site, but it's not necessarily maintenance. Is that correct?
Very limited.
Very limited need, and would you even say that there's some deferred maintenance we have to do?
There's an absolute deferred maintenance.
Okay. Well, what's the nature of that?
I'll start with the easy ones that people do in their own home often, the carpet cleaning, the interior exterior painting, those types of things. your cleaning of your gutters, all of those things, you do it at home. We do it when it's overflowing, causing a problem with walkway, those types of things. We want to limit damage, obviously, so if you have a problem, then we'll try to clean out the area with the problem, but it's not specifically preventative maintenance space.
Okay. All right. I know, for instance, there's preventative maintenance that in other parts of the city that we're not doing, it's deferred, going to get picked up someday. I've always wanted to try to capture that as a budget item, somewhere in the budget as a report that says, okay, we didn't do this year, it's going to have to get done sometime in the future. For only reasons as call out, so that people understand. I mean, we want to make sure everybody has, we're going to make some unpleasant, unhappy decisions here, but we want to make sure everybody knows what the information is.
John, I would like to follow up on that comment. There's lots of deferred maintenance on the community center that hasn't been done for years. There's dry rot over there, on the back of the building, around the windows. Is this supposed to have a paint job?
At some point, you mentioned the community center, I was going to reflect back on something that Councilman Wright said recently, and that's the paint job on the exterior of the public works building. Those are the types of things that they're, in fact, for the dry rot, we looked at that. Had a plan to try to get some volunteers there, but essentially took a look, and as it getting to the interior, it appears as it was immediately getting to the interior. So we're trying to gather some volunteers. We're at the end of the year.
And then the HVAC system on the community center, or the furnace, or the heat, or what?
Yes.
Is that working or not?
It is working, producing heat. They're able to essentially rebuild the guts a little bit, if you will. There's one more piece that they need to do to get it back so it's fully heating, but it's a Band-Aid at best. And so it's not deferred maintenance that replaces a bunch of the components along the way to keep them up, like you would your car. Every once in a while you replace your belt. May not be actually broken, but we try to do that. These facilities, we do have some preventative maintenance on the HVAC for that, so that we don't throw a belt that these facilities can actually cause a problem, just like your car. You actually do a lot of damage with those types of things. So, there's some limited preventative maintenance relative to that.
How much was the cost of getting that furnace over there operational?
It was limited. We were able to have someone come out, take a look, and talk them through, is there any way we can fix this, essentially. So off the top of my head, it's less than $2,000 versus a full-on replacement at 8 to 10.
Okay.
So we're looking at it all, essentially.
With no air conditioning.
The system does not have air conditioning.
John, did you have something else?
No, at this point, I'm not positive of where to go next. If staff time is limited, which it is not, it would be my desire to actually see that sort of the same breakdown on all of our, what page? Well, actually, no specific page. Just saying in the budget in general, if it was possible, I'd like to know for each of our elements here that we have on each page, what is the source of funds? What is general fund? What is something else? Because that allows us to identify where there might be some savings. Asking you to go back and do that at this point is going to be time intensive, and I'm concerned about that. And that was the reason I picked on the public works stuff, because while some of it is very critical, some of it is aesthetic in nature. And I was trying to identify that. But there may be some other opportunities approaching it from that standpoint in some of these other budgets. But I don't know how to get at that without causing folks to do something that's going to take away from something that's also very important. So,
our challenges in the general fund. And all of our activities within the city have commingled revenue streams. And so it makes it very difficult, you know, as we talked about, we have areas that are almost fully funded through other sources. And as long as what we're doing is achieving the work the city needs to be done and provide the services they're intended for, we probably don't need to spend a huge amount of time at this juncture diving into those. But where general fund monies are being expended, we've got to provide great scrutiny of that and ask ourselves some hard questions. Problem is, it's like this, and how do you pull that thing apart and say, this portion is general fund funded? And if we do that, does it fall apart? You know, does the activity fall apart and not leverage the monies that come from other revenue sources?
I do have a question. On page 43, the utilities, and line item 47, that's utilities and streetlights. What besides streetlights does that entail?
One of the largest components that is often not linked with streetlights is your traffic signals.
Okay.
Those have a utility bill, they're not technically a streetlight, but they do have a power charge.
So we can't reduce that one?
It would not be recommended.
How difficult would it be to turn out all the lights except the ones at intersections, street lights?
We engaged in a preliminary conversation with PSE, who owns and maintains the streetlights throughout the city. And there is a charge per light to physically visit and essentially modify the wiring at each location so that it wouldn't come on. You'd have some potential energy savings, but there's still, the standard would still exist, so a portion of what we pay in our monthly charge, pay the energy charge plus what's called a facilities charge, where it goes out, we call, they come out and they fix it. But it provides for their insurance and things like what we were just talking about on agreements. So the fixture still exists, and so there's still a monthly charge per that. If we were to select any or all, it would be different than what our current standard is for new developments. Again, if we selected, I think it was half the number is over 50,000 initial charge to visit half of those lights and get them turned off. And then so there's a buyback period for that upfront cost, which I'm seeing in the life savings. So that's the preliminary conversations. They do not know how long it will take to implement. We did not get that far.
We're not going to save until 2013.
It did not appear that there was.
Okay, thank you.
I might mention too, what's the impact by having a lot less light on public safety?
Well, I think I would say that DuPont's probably more lit up than your average town. I don't think, if you're going to Tacoma, I don't think it's.
We also have less crime.
Does anyone else have questions for the Public Works Director at this time? Like I said, we're having a discussion. Ideas are coming out, options, and this won't be the last time that we see Peter before we adopt it.
Reserve the right to torture anymore.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
He secretly enjoys it.
Right.
We haven't even got to the surface yet.
Yeah. Just be a.
So I guess, Peter, thanks for your time. Is that doable, is going back and trying to trace the general fund money as it flows into these budgets, is that doable? Is that something that you've got someplace that isn't going to be exactly?
No, I think just kind of doing a cursory look down our revenue sources in the general fund. Some of them are clearly tied to a specific function. The vast majority are probably not. So it would be, hard, I mean, you might be able to, especially in community development, you can show some of the reimbursable fees, revenues coming in that are associated with the revenue, professional engineering services that are going out. You can make a clear tie between that. But on some of these other ones, they're utility taxes and whatnot, they're pretty generic. They can be used on almost anything that the council would desire, so. We can try. I don't know when we can get it to you, but.
Okay. Well, I guess from my perspective, and I don't want to provide assignments because you know, how we can do that, but I am headed in the direction with proposing that we eliminate greenways. I'll let the last little bit that has to be done and just say, that it's not 120,000 anymore, it's 15. And in terms of parks, I would ask if we cut that back to the minimum non-general fund money, what more do you need in order to maintain the recreation program? What is that not going to get us? And then we'll have to decide whether we want to depend on citizens to step forward and fill it, or we want to fill it from the general fund.
Yeah, I agree with what John's saying, because I think, we gotta look at big chunks, let's not look at $50 line items and stuff, that's not gonna get us where we need to go.
Right, but, yeah, and then also, really, what's the cost of operating that bathroom at Powder Works Park? I think it's kind of an important thing, it's kind of in an isolated area,
It's about $4,000.
Yeah, it was about $4,000. Correct, and then it was
Right.
offset, and then that was but that's, actually it's more than that because it's offset by a porta potty that was added into the budget, which was about $1,800, so.
Well, and then we may have to address, okay, do we want to put a service fee, an increase in our charges on recreational programs to keep the cost of keeping some of the facilities available?
Remember, we do collect a fee for the cover, the park cover, the shelter. People do rent that, and I think that we need a bathroom to go along with that. Otherwise, I can't see justifying collecting a fee to use the shelter.
I agree, but should the city general fund subsidize the facility? And we're at the point we've got a cash and carry.
Yeah.
And those park rentals is estimated to bring around 2,000, maybe a little less.
Okay. My only closing comments for you, Peter, is please look at how you can do some of this work with seasonals. Maybe we can accomplish cleaning the bathrooms and mowing the 2 ball fields with seasonals.
Most of the park maintenance we currently do is done by seasonal staff.
And especially emptying garbage, doggy pots. That's another expense, people. Doggy pots is quite expensive. What is it, about 10,000 a year?
I believe it's around 5.
5,000.
And there's a limit, obviously, to stormwater, to water quality, especially depending, it's just particular locations.
That 5,000 a year, does that include the picking up the garbage only, and include the hours that they have to?
That's a good question. It does not include the hours. That's the cost of the supplies per hour.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Well, okay, on that topic, because I'm a pet owner, and we like having those things, and I got it, we're diligent users of them. How many pets do we register in DuPont annually? And it's not meant to be a stunt to chump, I just have no idea.
This is one that I actually asked sorry, got a ballpark, I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe it's a little over 300, I don't remember yet, that are registered in the city.
It's all boys. Yeah, I can see that.
We probably have a lot of cats that are unregistered as dogs.
We also have a lot of visitors that bring their dogs along the trail. So, but based on just that number, your average dog, I think, is at 3/4 of a pound of pet waste per day, times 300 per we're it's like 4,200 tons, something like that. And it's
And so the question is, we need to increase our licensing fee on pets to help offset the cost of that service, which is directly related to pets.
What I would think is we need more active contact to the pet owners and making sure they're licensed.
That gets back into the whole capacity.
Well, yeah.
We are,
I have seen Ron out there chasing down dogs to make sure they're licensed.
Well, no, that I would think would go along with the Humane Society.
Humane Society doesn't do that. We have a contract in phase with Lakewood that we're actually in the process of reducing. So,
Well, okay, so what does the contract with Lakewood Animal Control, whatever you call it, get us?
they respond when we have an animal complaint. Very limited canvassing, but primarily it is responding to animal costs.
Well, then on the other hand, what would they charge us to, we have police officers that run radar to catch speeders. So why can't we have an animal control person who is checking pet licenses?
We could if we were willing to pay more for them, because they don't have capacity out there. They share, I believe it's 2 officers, and Ron can probably address this even further, but I believe they have 2 animal control officers that cover Lakewood stuff that we do.
What are we paying for the,
24 hours.
excuse me, I'm sorry. What are we paying for the people picking up pets?
Animal control contract, is that what you're talking about there?
Yes.
Yes.
How much
What do we
is the
pay?
contract?
What's the contract?
I'm sorry, what do we pay?
What's the contract, yeah?
It's about to be $9,000 less.
Okay, and the second question would be, do you have any idea how beneficial, how much they actually do? How much, are they that beneficial to the community?
I believe Ron can address
Ron?
that. We may or may not have the most current.
I'm sorry, Larry, what was the
Yeah,
question again?
the question is this, we're paying about $9,000 for the animal.
No, the contract's being reduced by $9,000.
Currently, our contract we've been paying is $34,000. We've successfully renegotiated the contract, and it's $9,000 less than that. So next year, we're anticipating it's going to be 34 minus 9,000.
Well, my question is, once again, how beneficial is this particular organization? Are they coming here often, or just very, very seldom, or what?
Well, based on statistics from 2011, they came here at 138 calls they handled, 138 plus 68 plus 79 plus 92. I don't have my fingers and toes for that, I'm sorry.
Read those off again, 138.
It's 138, 68, 79, and 92.
300 something.
Yeah, just shy of 400.
Yeah.
And that was what their calculated activities were for the city of DuPont last year. They supplement and provide a tremendous service, quite frankly. The officers, on the other hand, just to be clear about the differentiation of services, the officers handle aggressive, biting, nuisance dogs that are creating a public safety hazard. The animal control officers follow up with a long-term process of getting dogs declared potentially dangerous or dangerous, putting dogs to sleep, getting fees, serving notices and papers. They also do the majority of our work in regards to dogs at large, dogs that are in the garbage, other nuisance kind of animal issue, dog problems. The officers generally don't handle that.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
So it's about $1,000 a visit. I don't know, $100 a visit.
Yeah.
Most licensed cats too.
There's
I mean, why should they get a free ride?
They're supposed to be licensed.
Okay, before you... Yes,
Yes.
yes, John. Go buy your license.
I'm on the one that
Okay, everyone, we need to move on because it's about almost 7:30. So do you have any more questions for the Public Works Director at this time? We'll see you again. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Now, who would you like to talk to? Fire department?
Fire department.
Fire department?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on up, Greg.
Can I, this thing that you handed out, I want to, because it covers what was this in here anyway? I'm trying to understand the math here.
These are, what you have before you, the Budget B proposal. These are the reductions or enhancements to revenue that were proposed by the mayor as part of his Plan B proposal. There are some other differences in the numbers between Plan A and Plan B, and that would be because the further we get into the year, the more, information that we get as far as, how 2012 is looking, or we'll get actual, like we got our actual insurance assessment for 2013, which was slightly less than what we had budgeted for. We're making those adjustments all the way through to capture as much savings as we can. So to align these with, try to put them together, there are some other, housekeeping issues that are kind of embedded in there as well.
Well, we saw some of this earlier, and I just want to make sure I understand what I'm looking at. Okay, eliminate service contract with West.
Why don't we have Greg Holt do his presentation first, and then we will go to the specifics of reduction.
Good evening, Council. I have the advantage of following Peter, so I can anticipate some of your questions. So I feel free, Peter. The A budget was $1,862,838. The B budget presently before you is $1,504,329. That is a reduction of $358,509. That reduction falls into two primary areas. It eliminates the service contract that we have with West Pierce Fire and Rescue. And what's not on this sheet is that the 2012 contract is $183,000. You will notice that it shows a savings of $104,680. And that is primarily because one of the services, well, you know that we will lose the operations chief, Greg Cooper, and he's a big portion of that entire contract. But we will have to buy back fire marshal services, which is also provided by West Pierce. And to do that, we will enter into a personal services contract with Michael Turner, who's been doing our fire marshal services, leaving a net savings of $104,000. The second area of reduction is eliminating 4 firefighters to include the 3 SAFER grant firefighters. And I would remind you, when we made that proposal 2.5 years ago, the federal government had just put a new program in play that said we did not have to retain them. So the fact that we're in this discussion is not a failure to me. It's where the federal government placed us, or they knew everybody was facing this. But nevertheless, we have found ourselves unable to, at this point, save those 3 positions, and then 1 additional position. And the elimination of those 4 creates a reduction of the budget of $254,677. Those 2 total, $358.
Okay, so this is where I have a question. Some of this goes into whole other areas outside of your department. We talked about a $300,000 SAFER grant, and then we talked about a 4th position, but you were showing savings of $254,677. I don't understand the math.
You're not getting an entire year's worth of savings here because the SAFER grant runs until the first part of April. So you would be funding them for the first quarter of 2013. Additionally, you have, even for the 4th firefighter, there's contractual language regarding layoff notices and 90 days. So the first you would be looking at laying off a firefighter would be the 1st of April, thereabouts. And so that's why this is not like a full $300,000, because you have to factor in that first quarter's worth of wages.
And I understand your question slightly differently. it's not the 3 firefighter, or the 4 firefighters do not save $254,000. It's $254 over the proposed A budget and the B budget. Because the A budget assumed that we would keep them for 9 months. You know, that they would be paid by FEMA for 3, and then the city would fund the next 9 months. So it isn't actual savings.
So that helps, because I gotta tell you, people sat out there and looked at this on the screen the other day, and follows credit. If you're taking a test in high school, you gotta, show your numbers.
Right, and that should have been, we should have had that in there.
That just was great confusion.
Well, and the other part that makes it a little bit more complicated too is the 300,000 is an estimate, and that was estimated at 100,000 per firefighter. Well, each firefighter we budget for on a per person basis, meaning it's not one size fits all. It's where are they at in their pay scale, where are they at as far as their benefits go, their family situation, all of those things play in. So you don't have identical savings for each. Each of them is slightly different based on those variables.
And I appreciate that. At some level, when we're making decisions on it, seeing the details is helpful. Okay.
The question might be asked, what does that mean? Well, in case of the West Pierce contract, it means that we take over IT, we take over records, training, fire marshal services, and it means that the duties and responsibilities of your ops chief get transferred to your fire chief. I would argue that your fire chief is charged with developing policy programs and overseeing the vision of the fire department, and your operations chief runs the day-to-day operations. So when you combine those 2 positions, you generally hurt some of the performance that the fire chief would normally accomplish. However, what I will tell you is I will do this job at 100% of my capacity for as long as I can, and the results will be I'll leave early or earlier than I would have. And that may be a good thing or a bad thing, who knows. But tenure in fire and police is 3 to 6 years. Ron has been here nearly 5 or somewhere in that area, and I've been here 3. So that is always a concern for you is, how do you replace the people who are phasing out?
And as we go forward in this, and we're not, as Penny's made real clear tonight, we're not making any decisions. We're asking pointed questions to better inform ourselves as we walk down a process to make decisions. One of the things I would like to, not tonight, but in future discussions over the next few weeks, prioritize to me buyback. You've shown a $359,000 reduction in your budget, basically between West Pierce contract and the 4 positions.
Sure.
That's what the city saves by eliminating those in 2013. If we go, we're going to sell Quartz's house and donate the money, what does it go to? All $50 that it's worth. Think in your mind, if we come to you and say, okay, within our limited budget, we're going to shift funding, what's your first $100,000 priority? What's your next priority? And please don't answer that tonight. Think about it. But that's kind of, I think, the issue as we go down this thing is a prioritization of buyback.
Actually, that's quite easy. All buyback comes in terms of firefighter positions. And the one thing I won't participate in is I've told you a number of times I can only be successful in the fire department if all divisions in the city are successful. So I won't engage in a confrontation with the police chief over whether or not we should save a police officer or firefighter. That's not my job. My job is to run the department I have with the money you give me to the best of my ability. But if you're saving dollars, you put them in, we have a wonderful facility, and I understand the the controversy over it. I have a lot of really great equipment, but I do not have the staff to staff that equipment to the level that we should have for this city. So all recommendations, fire chiefs, we're a dime a dozen. You can replace me in a heartbeat. But firefighters, they're the widget makers. Police officers are the widget makers. You know, they're the ones who bring you profit. Save the people. And public works guys, it's the same way. I am not going to engage in competing for library dollars. You know, this is your job. My job is to save people, and that's what I do best.
Larry?
Yeah, from what you said, I take it for granted the maintenance agreement is not included in the service contract limitation.
We did not cover that. The vehicle maintenance agreement is still in the Plan B budget. It's inexpensive.
What do we pay a year on that, Greg? What do we pay a year?
$27,000.
$27,000?
We pay a little more than a quarter of a full-time employee. It's based on engines cost us 6% of an FTE. And
You told me time after time that it's a tremendous service, though. They do an excellent job.
we would be hard pressed to beat it anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
We got to maintain it. That's pretty good to have.
And cars, you know, I've looked at everything this year. I toyed with the idea of taking the chief's cars all out of contract and just taking them a Jiffy Lube, and which will work as long as they don't break down. And so I've got to weigh the pros and the cons and try to get the best, you know, deal I can. That's a rock solid contract.
Of course, the longer we drive the cars, the more prone they are to needing maintenance.
That is true. That is true.
Okay, Mike, we'll let someone else speak here for a little while. Linda, did you have any comments or questions?
Have efforts been made yet to renew the SAFER grants? Has that been started yet?
The SAFER grant is, yes. We have a SAFER grant request in 2012. The 2012 SAFER grants have already started awarding. They started last week in October. They awarded for 3 weeks, and then the federal government halted those awards until after the government decides about the fiscal cliff that we sit on. So there's been no awards for 3 weeks. We submitted that request in the face of FEMA telling us that our timing was poor because we got one of the first awards in the United States, and now we want to extend that. And so our chances of getting that are pretty slim, but we have it requested.
Roger?
No comment.
John?
So you said you heard the earlier discussion, therefore you probably know where I'm going here next. You get, for the fire department, it gets largely 2 sources of funds. The source, the EMS levy, plus general fund. What else is there? I mean, obviously the SAFER grant.
Well, SAFER grant is, yeah, that's about $600,000 or $300,000 for a full year. The value of the entire grant is 6 something. Beyond that, it's just miscellaneous. Beyond that, it's nothing. We sell bicycle helmets at cost. We teach CPR classes, but we pay firefighters on overtime to teach them because they can't be called away from a class. So we have no other funds other than the tax dollars, really.
Do you, at one point, maybe you still are, doing inspections for businesses?
We do inspections with a minimum fee of $30, and throughout the year, we take in about $5,000 for doing inspections, but that's costed out as a cost of sending our people out. But it is a true income, yes. But I don't look at that very closely because it's 5,000 out of about 1.8.
Are there any models in, in municipal fire departments, like we have, where there's an additional fee charged for a call? Do you call? I'm just curious.
The only one I'm aware of is transport fees for medic units. There are other types of funding other than levies, but it'd have to be, we have additional fees for any homes that are outside the city limits. We can charge them the cost of putting a fire out their house, but I'm not aware of anything.
Thanks.
Larry?
So if you make these cuts, once again, the CERT will probably go, the third program, and inspection, once again, you have enough people to go out there and do the inspection, and of course, you're talking about 3 or 4 firemen, okay? Does that one extra make a heck of a lot of difference? Instead of having 9, we have 8. As far as the CERT program, the BLS, and all that kind of stuff?
The SAFER grant, by design, is meant to meet the standards of putting 3 firefighters on an engine. Your first comment, the CERT program would not be funded because, once again, it's done in overtime. We're still going to respond anywhere in the city in 6 to 8 minutes, but we're going to ride with 2 firefighters rather than 3. And I've said multiple times to anybody who listens, that is not as safe for my firefighters and not as effective for the citizens we serve. And the federal government has funded us to 3 firefighters because they recognize 3 is not required, but with the federal government it's recommended. And so that's why we engaged in the SAFER grant agreement with them. I will tell you, the Plan B budget eliminates 4 positions, and you know that I have 12, and that takes me to 8. And I said at the last council meeting, 8 is doable, but it's messy. If I have 3 shifts of 9 firefighters, then I'm a lot more stable than I am at 8, where I have to have hobos trying to fill the gaps. But it's all about services provided. You know, if we're on a medical call, we can do more with 3 than we can 2. But I think I've been pretty honest and open with the public and council on what we can accomplish. If you give me 2, we'll do the best job we can with 2. If we find monies for 3, we'll do that.
Okay.
This is a tough position to be in. And we're only talking about the financial issues here. I'm struggling with transport. How do I keep my people here when they see the problems we have? And right now I'm working hard on both those, because transport, medical transport in DuPont is a serious problem right now. So we're looking at all kinds of problems that we could do something different.
Eliminating that contract with West Pierce, are they saying they won't be able to help us at all, or it's going to really be downgraded, their aid?
All agencies are suffering the same fate as we are. You know, reduced AVs, reduced tax dollars. West Pierce made a commitment to use underutilized medic units to transport BLS within their own organization and be able to bill for that. Their responses to DuPont have more than doubled in the last year. They're not saying that they will not come.
Okay.
They're saying they don't want to come. If we call them, they'll help us out. But they're looking at the history, and they see that we're calling them more and more. And that's a problem for them when they're trying to fill in the same gaps we are.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, what would it cost to fund and staff our our rig for BLS.
Well, we have looked at, we have known for some time that it would take 6 to 8 firefighters to staff the medic unit. And if they're firefighter EMTs, it's been prohibitive for the 3 years I've been here. The 2 programs that we're looking at right now, because this is a serious problem for me, it's just as serious as this financial problem is. We're looking at a Browns Point resident program, and we're looking at an East Olympia part-time firefighter program. But they all come with cost. If they're firefighters, you've got to put $4,000 worth of equipment on their backs the first day they come to work, and they have to have the training. But we're working with the chief in East Olympia to see how he's doing it, and we're looking at a reserve program and cross-staffing our own engine. We currently cross-staff engine 25 and ladder 25 about 15% of the time. That was what I told you when we bought the ladder company, and it's been successful. But we're now doing that with the ladder company rather than the medic unit. And I told you we've transported 5 or 6 times over the last few months because no medic units are available in the county. And so that's the problem we're facing right now. But it comes with cost when we're trying to reduce.
Well, and I've told you this before, I have real heartburn in the fact that if you've taken our firefighters out of town because they have to transport someone, that means there aren't any firefighters in town. And, basically we're left uncovered to respond, to a call while they're gone.
That is true fact. However, protocol doesn't allow us to abandon a patient, so if there's no medic unit responding, we are now babysitting a BLS patient until the dispatch center finally finds one and gets it to us. So either way, we're out of service. That's the dilemma. We transport, we're out of the city. We don't transport, we're in the city, but we're out of service.
Fine predicament. Any comments, more questions, thoughts? This is his first go around.
Well.
You know.
Just remember when you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and these thoughts pop in your head, please have a piece of paper and a pen by your bed so you can write them down so you don't forget them for the next session.
Call me.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Good Pastor. Be sure and turn the microphone.
Good evening.
Good evening, Tom.
Pardon?
I said good evening, Tom.
Well, thank you. The proposed B budget, our department is funded 100% general fund money. Some very minor revenue comes in through some services, but the vast majority of the budget is general fund. The reduction would be in the Class B budget would be 1 police officer position, which is $87,769. As with the fire positions, the savings is reduced by the notice of layoff per contract, which would mean that for the first 3 months of 2013, we would still be paying the police officer position, and then for the last 3 quarters of the year, we'd actually see the savings from that layoff position. So the actual impact of our budget would be the $87,000 I talked about, and that's 1 sworn police officer position. What the effect on the department is that with the amount of staffing that we currently have, what we would do is we would eliminate and transfer the detective to patrol and we would lay off our junior officer. The impact of that would be that patrol is our highest priority because that's officer safety, period. The detective position provides valuable support to the organization at this point, and we would lose that support. What we get from the detective is case investigation, follow-up. The detective also does all the sex offender registration checks that are required to be done. The detective also provides, on rare occasions, some backup for the day shift officer. Right now, recall that 8 hours a day, from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, we have one officer working and rely very heavily on Steilacoom and Lakewood for support. On rare occasions right now, our detective can provide that support, but it's inconsistent, it's not reliable, and it's something that grossly interferes with what he's doing. The detective right now also is used when we have extended leaves. He can work patrol and save overtime. The detective position can also be used in certain circumstances. For example, the demonstration that we had, we used the detective rather than calling another officer on overtime. With the Bales preliminary trial, we staffed up an officer for that, not knowing exactly what the impact would be on DuPont, and rather than calling in somebody on overtime, we just shifted the detective patrol for that first 4 days, so we wouldn't have to pay overtime for that. The other thing that occurs in the department is just about everybody in the department averages the officers as approximately 300 hours off, whether it be sick, holiday time, vacation time, comp time. A large percentage of that is used by filling with overtime because of the amount of numbers we have to cover the shift. And with every officer that goes down as laid off or as vacant, that creates that many more shifts that we need to fill. We can do a great number of those by shifting existing personnel, but there are some of those shifts that have to be covered by overtime. So depending on how many personnel we lose from where we're at right now, creates that much more of a vacancy which is required to be filled by overtime. The other advantage that we have with the detective is we have several regional meetings that are investigative oriented. We have a fraud meeting, we have a intelligence meeting, we have other meetings where the detectives get together on a regular basis and talk about the crooks and the criminals and what they're doing and where they're at, new modus of operation that people are using. They compare names, they talk about people. It's a great opportunity for us to gather significant information. Without the detective position doing these types of duties, in addition to the investigation, those would shift to the supervisors, to the 2 sergeants. We need to keep connected with those groups. We need to continue with follow-ups. We need to continue with major case investigation. And that would then fall to the supervisors, the 2 sergeants, which would take them further away from their primary function, which is supervision and general backup to patrol. Which means then that the duties they won't be doing will then transfer to the police chief, and I would end up doing some additional duties and responsibilities that currently the 2 sergeants do. So there's certainly a roll-up in regards to the duties and responsibilities because they still need to be done in the organization, and that's just the reality if we lose the position. That's how that works up the organization. Anybody have any questions so far?
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, a quick question before you run. As we look at the crime in DuPont, rising or staying the same, lose a policeman, what's the scenario here?
Right now, as you recall, last year we were the safest city, so designated by statistics based on the reduction of things that were going on. But please keep in mind, I want to be kind of careful about this to make sure that I'm accurately reflecting what crime is. Our numbers are low to begin with. So any major shift in those numbers is significant. If I had, say, 500 burglaries a year and we had an increase of 20 burglaries, it would be almost insignificant statistically. But if we have 4 or 5 burglaries a year and that goes up to 7 or 8, that's a significant percentage increase. Right now, what we're seeing in town is we've had more burglaries than we had last year, and we're running about par for theft from autos and theft cases. And where we're seeing the increase is burglary. I guess our theft from autos are up just a little bit, but burglaries are up. Now, when I say up, that means, I don't know off the top of my head how many burglaries they had last year. I'll throw a dart at maybe 10 or 12 or whatever. This year we may have going probably 15, 16. So significantly, it's more numbers, but it's still a small number scenario. We're still a small crime town. The criminals haven't found us. The crime in town is still fairly low compared to our neighbors and other cities of comparable size. The advantage of the detective is when we do have those crimes, we can designate somebody to, that's their purpose for working, is to work that crime, make the contacts, do the follow-ups, get the evidence analyzed, do all those things, and that doesn't harm patrol right now. When we have those crimes without the detective, that means that a sergeant is then doing those things rather than his core function.
So you're saying basically, once again, if there's a policeman, once again, crime could, and the criminals out there, so-called criminals in DuPont, find this out, crime could.
I want to be kind of careful about that.
Yeah, okay, good.
I'm not sure I want to go there exactly. Our effectiveness in investigating the crime would be hampered.
Chief, on page 24 of the budget, it says 2 sergeants, 1 detective, and 5 police officers. Reflects elimination of 1 police officer position. Didn't you just say right there at 9/11?
I'm sorry.
That we were eliminating the detective position. The top first line there, 111. We are eliminating the detective.
Yes, what I would do is, as I said, our highest priority is officer safety and that's patrol.
Right.
So in essence, we would take that detective, we would lay off the junior officer out of patrol, and then move that sworn officer back into patrol.
So our finance department needs to correct that footnote.
Those have been accurately updated.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, we had that clarification publicly so that our citizens, right, don't think we're going to keep the detective position. So that would be, then there was also, wasn't there there was kind of a percentage or something for being in the detective position over what the pay would be on the police officer, so that's a little bit of a reduction too, isn't it?
There's a 5% assignment pay for detective. Yeah.
Okay. So what time frame is it that we only have 1 police officer on duty?
Well, currently,
How
based
many
on
hours?
8 hours a day.
There's an 8-hour time frame. We only have 1 police officer on.
Correct.
In the past, the fire chief has, explained, and we talked about it again about being out of service because they're either transporting or they're with a patient, and they're waiting for backup. How often does the police department find themselves in a position where they are waiting for backup? How often do you think?
Yeah, quite frequently. I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but it's a regular, frequent occurrence that occurs. I'm not going to say daily, but certainly several times a week. And it works both. We do that with Silicon. It works both ways. When we're needing assistance here, they come here. When they need assistance there, we go there as much as possible. The other issue is that you asked about is when we're tied up as the fire chief is and out of service, so to speak. That occurs when we're taking somebody to jail or we're tied up roadside with somebody that we cannot leave. And in those cases, we'll call Stillicum in, or if the officer's unavailable and going to jail, we'll advise Stillicum of that. So if there's an emergency call of some sort, they can respond, and we stack non-emergency calls. And we do the same thing for Stillicum. We'll go into Stillicum when they're doing out of town, whatever it is, back and forth.
You know, when I lived on the South Hill in Puyallup, and this was unincorporated Puyallup, lived in that same house for 20 years, my house was burglarized twice. And when I called 911, they asked me if the burglary was in progress. And I said no. They said, well, we'll be there in about 2 hours to take a report. So, you know, there's consequences of not having, you know, the correct, I don't know if I want to say correct, but a proper staffing level, you know, to meet our needs. And, you know, I would hate to see ourselves in this, you know, type of a position.
When I talk about staffing levels, my primary concern is officer safety and citizen response is second. If we can't protect our own people and provide the adequate officers so that they're safe in doing what they're doing, that's my highest priority. And that's the initial response in regards to staffing. And the second is based on when are the calls, when are the emergency calls, how do we schedule to accommodate the most people on at the most needed time, and those types of things. And the less people you start to have, the significantly more difficult and challenging it is to do that scheduling. And then all of a sudden, depending on what happens, you find yourself you're scheduling strictly for officer safety, and then you just get the calls whenever you can get the calls. Or maybe you don't go to some calls, or maybe there's certain hours you stack calls or different things. It just kind of depends on what the resources are. We can provide just about any kind of service that we get revenue for. The thing is that we calculate that service based on the amount of personnel we have, and then how we can provide that service most effectively to the city, and then go from there. But whatever we have, we'll do absolutely the best job humanly possible to provide that service.
Thanks. John?
So Chief, you say there's an 8-hour shift now in which there's only one cop on duty. And there's another cop in addition to this one that we're talking about. So you would lose a total of 2 cops. What would that mean to your staff?
It would mean that if we lost 2 police officers, we would go to 12 hours a day where we only have 1 officer working, among other things. Not only would everything that I already talked about happen, but then we would have an aggravated officer safety issue where we go to 12 hours a day with 1 officer working on 1 shift. So that'd be 16 days a month, 12 hours a day, we'd have 1 officer working.
Not 12 hours every day.
No, because the way, if we lost 3, that means our shifts would become unbalanced. We'd only have 3 people on 1 shift and 4 on the other, which means that the shift that's short would only have 1 person working instead of a double. So in essence, we would be short and have 1 officer from 6 in the morning till 2 p.m. And then when the sergeant goes home at 2 a.m., that means we wouldn't have a double on graveyard. So that 4 hours from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., we would have 1 officer working. That's where we get the 12 hours if we lost 2 positions.
You might want to explain, you talked about shifts. You're talking, what, 3 days and 4-day shifts?
You know, what we currently schedule, we've got the department split in half, and each shift works 12 hours, 4 days. So while the A shift works for 4 days, the B shift is off. And then the A shift goes off for 4 days, and the B shift works. And everybody works a 12-hour schedule. Right now, we've got a shift that goes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and then we have a supervisor that works 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. Is that right?
So it basically, it boils down to when the sergeant is on duty is when you have the double cover.
Well, he adds a double, but the double comes because right now in graveyard, we have on the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., we have 2 officers working. That's because, number one, officer safety issues, it's more difficult to get backup during those hours. And also that provides, when one of them is off, remember the 300 that I talked about? When one of them is off, if we don't have a double on that shift, it's extremely difficult to get somebody in to fill that. And this way we lessen that problem. We've got the other person working and don't need to worry about a fill issue. It's kind of hard when you work 6 p.m. to 6, or 6 a.m. to p.m. to come back in and work a double 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
So the reason that you have more people between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. is because that's where there's more mischief going on? Or?
Well, we have a fair amount of our family disturbance calls that go on there. We've got statistics that we're working out right now that show for family disturbance calls, for example, our busiest time for family disturbance calls at this time, our 5 most busiest times is 7 at night till midnight. The actual activity that we have, our busiest time, including calls for service, traffic, everything that we do, at this point, our busiest times are 8 to 8 p.m., 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., 7 p.m. to 8, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and then it starts going into the afternoon and early morning hours.
Okay, so so there is a rhyme to your reason of your staffing levels.
That's it, and also we've got contract language that specifies that.
Oh, so it's in the contracts. So that's another point that council members need to be cognizant of. That there's contract language in the union. Any comments, questions, council?
Are there many times when backup is scarce or non-existent?
It's never non-existent, it just depends on how long it takes to get there. And it depends on where the backup is needed in DuPont. If it's on the backside of Hoffman Hill, it takes longer to get there from somebody from Stilikin or Lakewood. And depending on what they're doing, Lakewood comes in to cover. Stilikin is our primary cover unit, and that may be anywhere from 6 to 8 to 9 minutes to 10 minutes. It kind of depends on what they're doing and where they're coming from and how many people they have working also.
Does the initial officer wait for backup on a domestic in a situation like that?
Frequently they will. They'll wait down the street so they can watch the house to see what they can gather as to what's going on, but frequently they will wait until the cover officer gets there.
Ron, does Pierce County Sheriff's respond out here? I know we have some unincorporated area down here.
No.
So who takes care of the unincorporated area like off of Mounts Road?
We recently agreed to a contract with Pierce County that if we get dispatched to one of their calls, we can charge them for that. And as soon as we got the contract, we've not been out there to handle calls. They stack their calls, or they get to them when they get to them.
Wow, that sounds like the kind of coverage I have living on the South Mountain Puyallup, being in an unincorporated county. Maybe we should disincorporate. That would save us a lot of money.
I'm not going to go there.
That That's an option.
That's not even funny.
Okay. It was floated. Well, thanks, Ron. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or Ron, John, you look like you want to say something. Oh, you need to go, you're sick, okay.
So I apologize for folks that are coming up afterwards, but I need to go.
Okay, all right.
Take care, mate.
Thanks, Ron. That was round one.
Thank you. I'm sure I'll be back.
We'll start counting bills.
Okay. I don't know if the one thing on the list, increase utility tax rates, water and stormwater. I think we need to clarify that is the outcome of the business. This isn't part of the study that we did in the fall. Was it just the rates that we increased, and this is increasing the tax?
Correct. Water rates and stormwater rates, there was a schedule that was developed as part of the comprehensive study that was done. And it sets the rates for, I believe, the next 5 or so years out. This is the utility tax rates. The utility tax rates were increased a year ago. As part of that, and part of that increase was because of the fact that the general fund is now statutorily required to fund hydrant maintenance out of the general fund, as we have to transfer the maintenance from the general fund into the water fund. And so there was a utility tax rate increase at that time to cover just that specifically. These two rate increases for the water and the stormwater was part of the mayor's proposal to generate additional revenue for the general fund.
And this, what is the tax rate going from to?
It would be going from 11% to 12% for water, and it would be going from 8% to 10% for stormwater.
So the last two items on the sheet you handed up, the utility tax rate increase and the establishment of square footage B&O tax, those are revenue increases, where everything else on this is a spending reduction. And so the net impact on the budget A is $921,483 to get to budget B.
Correct.
Okay, we had talked about a $1.2 million bogey, which is why we were asking for what we were asking for. Am I missing $300,000 that we still need to find? Does this balance the budget?
This balances the budget, but this does not, again, it is the $1.2 million that the property tax increase was asking for was for the $770,000 for the debt service, and then the approximate $300,000 to retain those 3 safer grant firefighters.
Yeah, so that $300,000 is not an expense, well, it's mitigated part, I understand that, 254,677 now. So long term, we don't have to address the $300,000, that's just a loss in service.
I have a question. I don't see anything listed here regarding fees on the rentals. Has that been?
That's already included in Plan A.
Oh, okay.
Some of the business reforms were already included as part of Plan A. The employee-based tier structure for the business license, as well as the rental property business license fee, were already included. And you'll see on Tuesday night's agenda coming before you, I think there's 11 ordinances that we're working on right now. It's amazing, and most of those have to do with, in some way, shape, or form, implementing parts of Plan A and/or parts of Plan B. So you'll see ordinances for the business license reform, you'll see ordinance for the rental property, you'll see an ordinance for utility tax rates, you'll see an ordinance for the square footage and all of those for the council to start deliberating on and have a lot of information and detail on each of those revenue options. Moving forward on Tuesday, actually, hopefully your packet will be going out tomorrow if I can finish all the ordinances, otherwise you'll get it sometime this week.
Job security for me.
Yeah, they're working on my pneumonia, so.
Council, any more questions? Roger, you've been kind of quiet tonight.
Correct.
Well, I guess we will adjourn the meeting at 8:18. Thank you.
Oh,